go to Proverbs chapter 15, okay? Verse 20. Verse 20. As you find your way, as I've been reading this week through this, multiple times, there was one day that I was studying at the house, and I came out of the study upstairs and came downstairs to fill up my coffee, and just kind of honestly just had to like step away from it for a moment, because it's Book of Proverbs is overwhelming. It's like this, especially when you get into these parts where it's just one statement after another, and they hit so heavy. I would come downstairs and Elizabeth would be like, "How's it going?" And I told her growing up this morning, I was like, "Man, Proverbs is something else. It's something else." I don't know what to say about it sometimes. It's just over and over you read these texts, and we're going to go through a bunch of them today, okay? We're going to go through a bunch of them and talk about this reality. But one of the things that I want us to understand is that we all want to be wise. We all have this desire to be a wise person, to make good decisions and live a life that, as we talked about last week, that's full of love, joy, and peace, the things that we desire. And that is to seek after wisdom. And wisdom is the presence of God in our lives. It's Jesus. It's daily decision. For that, we all want this. And as I give you this message, I'm going to quote a book, and I've probably done this before. This message, I promise you, is not me standing up on the top of a mountain, throwing down the rope to you, saying, "All right, get up here where I'm at." This is me standing 3 inches off the ground, looking for the next hand grip, saying, let's climb this thing together." And that's how Proverbs feels. And I think it's probably felt like you this week, if you really dove into it, really thought about it, you're just like, "Man, I'm so far away from the top of the mountain," if you want to call it that. And so, as we go through this, be gracious with me. Be gracious with me. And the other thing that I want us to understand is this. When we listen to messages, we have a tendency, I don't know, if you're like me, I have a tendency, and if you're like me, and I have a sneaky suspicion that you are, I tend to listen to messages and think about all the people who need to hear this message. Some of y'all laughing, so y'all do the same thing. You're like, "Yeah, I wish so-and-so was here to hear this message. I wish so-and-so was here to hear that part of that message. Oh, I need to log that, because next conversation I have with so-and-so, I'm going to bring this in and say, Pastor Austin said this." All right, and this is what I need us to understand today, more than any time. But don't ever have that. I mean, log things in, because God will bring those back. That's all necessary and good. But we want to first approach the message, and I'm pleased that I want us to approach this one. Don't listen to this as thinking about who needs to hear this. Listen not as who is in my life who needs to hear this, but you need to hear this. I need to hear this. We're all, at best, 3 inches off the ground looking for the next hand grip, trying to live wisely in the presence of God. And so, one of the major overarching things as we looked at in the introduction and overview of the book of Proverbs, and I'm probably not going to be really exciting this morning, I'm just going to tell you. Okay? So if you was expecting like that big energetic Austin today, it might be a little bit more mellow until we get to the end, and then who knows, Spirit make us, let loose in me. One of the overarching themes is there's a lot of comparison as we've talked about these antithetical parallelisms that are found in Proverbs, and it's these compare and contrast. And if you've read this week in the Proverbs, you've noticed these things. And so what we have is we have the fool versus the diligent. This is one of the people that are being contrasted: the diligent person versus the fool. And the fool takes on a couple of different types of people. Brother Don was asking me, he was like, these Proverbs kind of jump all over. They jump all over the place. It's like, is there a book that somebody has collected all of the ones that are like, they're about this specific topic, and then here's all the ones that are in this specific topic? I have lightly looked. I have not searched diligently for that book yet. I have yet to find it though. I did not expect that it would take me very long to search. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong places, but I'm going to keep looking for that, and maybe I can get that out to all of you. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to do a little bit of that. I'm going to kind of give you a list of kind of ones that fall in some of these categories and in these pictures of what it looks like to be the fool versus what it looks like to be the diligent. And once again, your boy 3 inches off the ground trying to find the next hand grip, okay? All right, so let's jump into it. Well, here's a perfect example of kind of this in Proverbs chapter 15, verse 20, okay? Is everybody there? If you're there, say word. Word. All right, let's get into the word so the word can get into us. A wise son brings joy to his father, so the diligent person. The diligent. But a foolish man despises his mother. So here's a contrast. The foolish man versus the diligent or wise person. Let's pray and ask God to reveal these things to us, and let's see some truths. Father, we love you. Lord, we thank you. We need your grace. We need your mercy. We need you in everything. We need you to speak this morning. God, help us to understand that none of us are walking diligently the way that we should. None of us measure up to these realities that we're going to see. But your presence in our lives, when we seek after you, like we talked about last week, you put us into a process where we are becoming more and more diligent. We're becoming more and more like Christ. And so let not guilt rain down on us this morning, but inspiration. Maybe we be inspired to live more like Jesus and to be a more diligent person and move away from the foolish person in our lives. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. All right, so here we go. I told you we're going to run through a bunch of verses, okay? And so that one was just one example of a multitude that we're going to look at. The first fool that we see is what we would call the gullible. He's the naive or the easily led person. Okay? This person, they're not nefarious. They're just irresponsible. Right? You've met this person, or maybe you're this person. Like, sometimes they're just that fun-loving person, and they just find themselves in the bad circumstances just because they're so naive. They're just really gullible. And Proverbs has a lot to say about this person. They're not nefarious, they're just irresponsible. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 32, and a lot of these scriptures are going to be on the board. And so you can just, don't try to flip to them, just look up here and just read them there and see how this goes. For the apostasy of the inexperienced will kill them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. You see, he has no initial desire to go after the wrong things. He's just complacent, and it destroys him. His inexperience is the thing that kills him. And it's this idea of they're a person who they don't have nefarious means in their heart. They're not longing to do evil things, but they don't have intentionality, and so they fall into this irresponsibility with all of that, and they're just easily led into being killed and destroyed in their lives. This person, they need visual lessons. And it's a person who needs a visual lesson versus a person who learns from correction. Look at Proverbs chapter 19, verse 25. It says this: strike a mocker, and the inexperienced will learn a lesson. They'll sit that you strike that. They need to be struck. They need that physical lesson for the inexperienced to learn. Rebuke the discerning, and he gains knowledge. You just have to speak it. Now, which one do we want? Which one's the diligent person? The diligent one is the one who can receive a rebuke and learn from that. The person who needs a visual lesson. It's this person who they have to learn on their own. That hard-headed individual who just won't take somebody's word for it, but has to learn the hard lesson on their own through their own experience. That's what I mean by the visual lesson. That's a gullible person. They don't have any. They're not nefarious. They're not going out to do evil things. They're just so hard-headed sometimes. They can only learn from their own experience. They have to be struck like a mocker for them to learn, rather than learning from the correction of somebody else. They're not willing to learn from others by receiving correction. They learn just from experience. And that's a hard way to learn. We all learn from experience, and experience can be a great teacher. But can I get an amen? Some of us wish we could go back and be like, well, I wish I would have just listened and not had to experience. Right? That's the diligent person who's able to do that. The gullible person also, they're one who they have nothing better to do than just chase vanities versus a person who's preparing for the future. They're just chasing the vanities of this world. Proverbs 15 verse 21 says this: foolishness brings joy to one without sense, but a person with understanding walks a straight path. Foolishness brings joy to the one without sense. So the foolishness, they don't even have a sense of it. They're just chasing after these things, and they don't have nothing else better to do. It's that person who it's like boredom, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna go do all of these things that result in destruction in my life because I don't have anything else better to do. Well, why don't you have anything else better to do? You haven't been a diligent person who has said, okay, I'm going to decide today to do things that build my future. They just chase after those things. Chase after vanities. Boredom leads to trouble. As the old saying goes, it's like this: idle hands are the devil's workshop. Right? It's just when I don't have anything to do, when I don't have anything to do, I'll just go find something to get into. I'm bored, I'm just going to go find something to get into. You ever hear somebody say that? They're walking in the path of the gullible, the fool. Because the reality is, we know there's always something we can be doing to plan for our future and to be putting our life in order. And planning and doing things now that will affect and benefit us in the future. So the gullible person, they say, I have nothing better to do, let's go chase the vanities. The wise or the diligent person is the one who's preparing for their future. This is the contrast that's set up. The understanding, the person who understanding walks a straight path because he knows where he's going. So my question is, are you the gullible? Have you, and not just, because this is the deal. These descriptions are not going to define you, the totality of you. There's probably just small aspects of them that you're like, I'll fall into that one. In this area of my life, right? Maybe you're extremely diligent in some areas, but extremely gullible in others. And so the question is, how have we fallen into the trap of being this person who is the gullible? And these words that I'm giving you, the gullible, there's going to be more. The stubborn, the stupid is another one. These are all actual, they're translated words from the Hebrew. They use different words. The fool is described in multiple different words. And that's the words that we're looking at. So are you the gullible? Are you the gullible? And in what way? The next question is, or the next person, rather, that typifies the fool in Proverbs is the stubborn. They're intellectual, they just choose badly. It's not an issue of intellectual capacity. They have an intellectual ability and capability, they just make really bad choices. This person is, we fall into the trap of a fool in two ways sometimes. Well, three ways. The gullible, we're just lack of actually putting any effort, intentionality into things as we just looked at. And then one is we're focused but on the wrong things. We're focused, yes. We have intentionality, yes, but towards and directed towards the wrong things. This is the stubborn person. This is the stubborn person. And this is what it looks like in their life. Personally, let's look at it personally, like as an individual, you look within yourself. It's a person that has no patience for wisdom versus a person who can wait on the Lord. The person who is stubborn, they have no patience. They have no way. They want it now. I want it now. Proverbs 17, verse 16. Why does a fool have money in his hand with no intention of buying wisdom? So he has the capacity, but he doesn't want anything to do with wisdom because wisdom takes patience. He's just going to get what he wants. Get what he wants as fast as he. I want it now. I deserve it now. This is the idea of entitlement. I want it now. I deserve it now. It's mine. I'm going to get it as fast as I possibly can. So personally, is that you? You have no patience for wisdom. No patience. Just the first thing available is where you're going to go. If it sounds good, I'm going with that. Second, they're opinionated with no thought. They're opinionated with no thought versus a person who's thoughtfully contributive. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 2 says, the tongue of the wise makes knowledge attractive. The tongue of the wise makes knowledge attractive. So that's thoughtfully contributing to the conversations and the topics and the issues that you are a part of. But look at what it says second. But the mouth of fools blurts out foolishness. That's word vomit, is what I call it. You know, when you have the feeling that you need to throw up, it's like, it's quick, ain't it? It just hits you and it's out. I know this well because my daughter has done this a couple of times in the last week. It's like I see it. It's, the eye, she gets the vomit eye. You can see it in their eyes. Whoa, no, something bad might happen. And then it's like, get them somewhere where it's not on carpet or in a car. As fast as possible. And we know people who, that's what they're like. You get in, like, the topic gets broached and in their presence, and you're like, oh no. And it's just, the first thing you want to do is just roll your eyes like, oh God, here goes this. Rather than a wise man who the diligent person makes wisdom attractive, speaks wisely. Their tongue draws people in rather than making people repulsed. This is the stubborn person. The fool. The fool. Personally, this is how they look too. They're unaware of his or her foolishness versus a person who is aware of their weaknesses. It's awareness. They're unaware. Listen to Proverbs chapter 26, verses 7 through 9. A proverb in the mouth of a fool is like lame legs that hang limp. Giving honor to a fool is like binding a stone in a sling. A proverb in the mouth of a fool is like a stick with thorns brandished by the hand of a drunkard. Just the word pictures here are just incredible, aren't they? They're unaware of what they're doing. Just imagine a person with a massive stick with massive thorns, obliviated, stumbling all over the place. I mean, you can see it, and you're just wearing people out with a stick of thorns. Like, you just want to laugh. And also just cry because it's so heartbreaking. They're so unaware of what is happening and what they are doing. This is the stubborn person. This is the stubborn person. It's like a stone being sewed into a sling. Can you imagine? You would just... And that's all they ever do. That's not a sling. I don't know what that is. It's a fan, I guess. Their attempts at wisdom fall flat. This is the stubborn person. They can't even imagine themselves being mistaken. That's the stubborn person. Have you been that person? You're so locked in, that you couldn't even imagine that you were mistaken in any area of the conversation. As if you entered that conversation and you have all the answers. Rather than potentially God wanting to teach you something in that conversation. How often we fall into these mistakes of the gullible and the stubborn, yes? The stubborn one prefers comfortable illusions versus uncomfortable realities. Proverbs chapter 14, verses 8 says this: the sensible person's wisdom is to consider his way, but the stupidity of fools deceives them. They deceive themselves. They're more comfortable with these false illusions. They can make up these ideas and these illusions in their head to justify why they're doing what they're doing. They're deceived, rather than being aware of the actual realities that are there. Because they're so stubborn. They can't imagine themselves as being mistaken. It's self-deception to shirk responsibility. And I'm going to justify it by any means necessary. I'm going to make up these illusions in order to justify my stubbornness. And that is the way of the fool. That is the way of the fool. So that's personal. What does this person look like in society? Because this is reality, man. When we live as the fool, it not only affects us personally, our character, but it affects the society that we live in too, yes? So what does this person look like in society? They're a menace and a waster of time. Versus the contributor and a maximizer of time. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 7 says, "Stay away from a foolish person, or you will gain no knowledge from his speech." It wastes your time. This is the stubborn person because his realities and the things that he or she is speaking is all based on their illusions that they've self-deceived themselves with. They're stubborn, and when they're stubborn, they become a menace and a waster of time. Versus a person who contributes. They're not. A menace is somebody who just is a dredge on society, right? They're just breaking things down. They're destructive, as we'll see in just a second, rather than constructive. They take from, they remove from, rather than contribute. A diligent person contributes. And instead of wasting people's time, they maximize people's time. They value people's time, and they figure out ways to help that person maximize their time. I hear this all the time. People in our time in the world right now, it's like, I don't have time for this, I don't have time for this. Maybe you're listening to the wrong people. One, maybe you're listening to the wrong books. Because there's one book that will maximize your time. Scripture says, redeem the times. I've experienced that specific thing in my own life. How walking with Jesus will maximize your time. There were times when I was pursuing my degree. I had kids in the house, I had a wife, I had a full-time job, and I'm like, how am I going to do all of this schoolwork? And man, I would just say, God, I'm putting all my trust in you. I'm walking with you. Help me understand these ideas, these themes in Scripture as quick as possible. Help me pick them up. Help me not waste time and have to reread things. Help me to understand them in my heart, in my mind, and grasp them. And what would happen, y'all? Like, it wasn't nothing on me. It's not because listen, I failed out of college my first go at it. And that was me trying to do it on my own. And when I put my faith in Jesus and began to walk with Him and following that, I made good grades. Good grades. And what God did was I would walk away from these moments, and I would be blown away. I'd be like, the sun just stood still. There's no way I was able to accomplish that much work in 2 hours. How did that happen? I'm not that smart. Y'all hear me? I'm not that skilled. Those who've been around me know I'm not. I'm boiling a china shop. I am the stubborn one, okay? I'm the stubborn one. This is me. This is like me. And yet I've seen God work and maximize my time when I hand it to Him and I listen to speech that is wholesome and good and communicates wisdom into my life. The stubborn person is a menace and a waster of time. I'm gonna sit here just for a little bit longer. One of the great convictions of my life, the thing that breaks my heart in my own life, is from the age of 15 to the age of probably 22. All I did was waste time. I look back and it breaks my heart where the things that I could have accomplished during those days, I just wasted time. And furthermore, I was a menace on society too. Are we a contributor? Are we a maximizer of time? How have you set yourself in this place of the stubborn, which is the fool of Proverbs? The stubborn one they're destructive, I said a minute ago, versus firmly constructive. It doesn't mean that you don't come in and have anything to offer. It just means that you're constructive in what you offer, not destructive. The stubborn person always seems to have that knack for tearing things down. They use their so-called wisdom to destroy, tear apart. The diligent person, the person who walks the way of Jesus, as we say it, the person who walks with Lady Wisdom, as Proverbs would communicate it, who listens to the voice of his Father, as Proverbs would create it, they're firmly constructed. They build up. Proverbs 17, verse 12. Better for a person to meet a bear robbed of her cubs than a fool in his foolishness. For real. Like, come on, that's a pretty bold word picture. I saw a video the other day. I like to mountain bike. Let me say this. That's a lie. I used to like to mountain bike. I haven't come back for like 2 years. I would like to get back at it, though. I would like to like it again. I was watching this video of these guys mountain biking, and this bear was chasing this guy down a mountain. Huge. Have y'all seen this video? I mean, and the path down the mountain, he's on like one of the downhill trails, and it's going like this, but the bear is just running straight through like this, and he's like, and I mean, it's just, and then he gets like on like a last curve or whatever, and then the video just goes away. You're like, did he make it? Did he not? I don't know. All I know that is this: if that bear caught him, lights out. Done for that. That thing was not happy that he was on his mountain, right down his mountain. Was not happy about it at all. A bear robbed of her cubs? You would be better off meeting that person than the stubborn person. Wow. You know what else they do? They make mountains out of molehills versus being thoughtful and giving an appropriate response. Proverbs 29:11 says, a fool gives full vent to his anger. Just a little bit of anger, he just full on. It's like, that's not that big of a deal. Why is that response there? You're making a mountain out of a molehill. That's the stubborn person. Versus a person who has a thoughtful and appropriate response. A wise person holds it in check. They're thoughtful about this thing. And they respond appropriately. The fool, the stubborn versus the diligent. Furthermore, the stubborn person, they bring sorrow, bitterness, and calamity to their relationships. Just a quick example of this. We read it, one of them in 15 verse 20. A wise son brings joy to his father, joy. But a foolish man despises his mother. Brings sorrow. There's all over the place. Proverbs 29:11 said Proverbs 19 verse 13. A foolish son is his father's ruin, and a wife's nagging is an endless drink. So the foolishness, the stubbornness of a person affects the relationships that they have. It affects relationships. The stubbornness. It brings sorrow, bitterness, and calamity relationally. Versus a person who brings joy, generosity, and growth relationally. These are the two things. And this is the thing, we read it in verse 20. The stubborn could care less. What does it say? But a foolish man despises his mother. He could care less. The sorrow and the calamity and the bitterness that he brings to the relationships that are around him, the destruction of the relationships, they could care less. That's a stubborn person. Are you stubborn? What areas in your life do you fall into some of these categories, whether it's personally or society? It's heavy, isn't it? You see why I just kept coming back downstairs and saying, boy, this is something else right here. Solomon was really wise, had a way and a knack for speaking that just pierced to the heart. But it calls us out too and inspires us to be something better than the stubborn person and the gullible person. But what about the stupid person? This word in the Hebrew it's almost the same as the stubborn, but it's darker. That's the way it's defined. It's like they don't even know how to describe it. It's just like, this is the darker person. They have no restraint versus the person who's self-controlled. No restraint. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 16. A fool's displeasure is known at once, but whoever ignores an insult is insensible. That moment displeasure, no restraint, just flying off the handle, right? No restraint in no way. They have no self-control about themselves. Also, they have no sense of proportion versus a person who understands moderation. Proverbs 29, verse 9 says, a wise person goes to court with a fool, and there will be ranting and raving, but no resolution. There's no sense of, like, all right, when you go to court, what you're supposed to do is strategically and concisely speak. You need the points, the main points, right? But you don't want to go there and spend all day and then have no resolution. You want to go there, spend as little time, and have a resolution, right? It's a sense of no proportion. They have no idea how to be proportional in their life. They have no idea how to moderate things. They eat massive proportions. They listen to massive proportions of content, and yet they never apply any of it. Right? We have this whole group of people now in our society because we're so inundated with information. It's just information overload. We have more information in your pocket than most of humanity. No. All of humanity prior to our generation had in their entire lifetime. We have it right here. And yet we have less actual practical living out those truths that are found in your pocket. Lots of information, but actually they're not living it out. They don't put it to practice. They have a flippant outlook on life versus a biblical worldview. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 9 says, fools mock at making reparation, but there is goodwill among the upright. They mock it. They're just like, what does it matter? Nothing matters. It's in the past, man. It doesn't matter. Let's move on. They have a flippant outlook as if things don't matter. It's just whatever. Move on to the next thing. As if things haven't hurt people or helped people or all of those things. Versus a biblical worldview that understands and sees the reality of people's lives and how their lives are affected by even the decisions of their parents. As we see in Israel's case, think about them wandering in the wilderness. All them kids had to wander in the wilderness until all their parents died. Because of the decisions of their parents. Now God was faithful and He was with them, fed the manna, all the good things are happening. Flippant. This is the stubborn person, but they're darker. They don't even just flip it. They don't care. It don't matter. I don't want to hear about what happened to you. I don't care. I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about any of that. Very self-centered. Very self-centered. A flippant outlook is a very self-centered outlook versus a biblical worldview that, a biblical worldview can be summed up as what we talked about in our growth group this morning. Love God, love people. What's important? God and people. You don't have a flippant outlook. It does matter what happens to people. We care for people because we care for God, which makes us care for people. Lastly, they're closed off. They're closed off to God and reason altogether. Versus a person who is not just open to God, they're receptive to God. Right? This stupid person is, as some of them would interpret it. They're closed off to God and reason. Versus the diligent person who is a person who is receptive to God. Who is positioned. Always think about that. All those who play sports. Have played sports at any point in time in your life. There's the ready position or the athletic stance. The whole point is what that puts you is in a position of readiness or posture for readiness. And the diligent person is postured that way before God. They're just ready to receive. Not just open to Him, they're ready. They're ready, expecting. They have anticipation. versus the person that's closed off to God and reason. Proverbs 17, verse 7 says it this way: eloquent words are not appropriate on a fool's lips. How much worse are lies for a ruler? They're completely closed off. It's not appropriate for them. They don't even think it's appropriate. And the way you think about it is, what if a ruler lies to you? What happens? It affects everybody. That's how opposed you should be to this being closed off to God. So my question is, are you the stupid one? In what ways are you the stupid one? First question is, are you the stupid one? And we all should be like, yeah, sometimes. Now the question is, will be, how are you? How are we that? How are we the gullible? How are we the stubborn? How are we the stupid? And then the last one is the sluggard, the lazy. This one knows what's right, but it's unfocused. So the stubborn one, they're focused just on the wrong things. This is the one who misses the mark and becomes the fool because they know what's right, but they're just unfocused. They're just unfocused. Here's some things about the sluggard. He will not begin things. He won't start things. Versus a person who we would call an early adopter. They're quick to adopt things. They're quick to jump in and get started and go. Proverbs chapter 6, 9 through 10. Listen. How long you stay in bed, you slacker? When you get up from your sleep. When will you get up from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the arms to rest. He'll not get up and do something. Like I heard one guy say it this way. He's talking about a kid. I don't even remember who this was. He was talking about it. It was so funny. He was like, this is the person who wakes up in the morning, opens and closes their eyes 10 times and says, all right, my workout's done. That's hilarious. That's a good mental picture. This is this person that won't begin. The person who won't begin things. Right? Also, they won't finish things. Versus a person who's focused to completion. The diligent person is focused to completion. This person will not finish things. Proverbs chapter 12, 27 says, a lazy hunter doesn't roast his game, but a diligent person is wealth is precious. So just imagine going out, spending all the money and the resources and getting up early, hiking out into wherever you got to hike to hunt. I don't hunt. Where you got to go do all that. I can't imagine that it's like an enjoyable experience. Hiking all the way out there is probably exhausting. Lugging a gun with your big, waterproof boots and your camouflage on, all that stuff. Getting out there, then, you got to do that multiple times from what I hear in order to actually kill an animal, unless you're just like the dude who ties animals up to trees with corn and then shoots them that way. That's cheating out here. And you actually go out there, it takes you multiple times to actually kill something, and then you kill it, you bring it all the way back to your house, and you just leave it sitting outside, and just go in and be like, done! It's like, who would do that? You're like, that's just foolish. Exactly. When we don't finish things, we act like the lazy hunter who doesn't roast his food. Just leaves it out there to rot and waste away. Thirdly, the sluggard won't face things. The sluggard won't face things versus the diligent person who makes calculated confrontation. Oftentimes we do this. He believes his own excuses versus confronting his weaknesses. And here's one of the excuses. I'm just going to be a person of peace. Which what you mean is I'm not going to confront anything. I'm just going to sweep everything under the rug and hope it goes okay. Good luck with that. Doesn't mean you confront everything that happens. You don't make mountains out of molehills. There is a reality when the wise person, the diligent person, confronts. He makes calculated confrontations rather than not facing things. He believes his own excuses versus confronting the weakness. As Proverbs chapter 2, verse 13, the slacker says, there's a lion outside. I'll be killed in the public square. Lions in the public square? Potentially. Statistically speaking, yeah, maybe 1 out of 10 billion. And it might be you might be the one. But they believe that. So they don't go out and face the things. They rationalize their laziness versus confronting the self-deception that is within them. They rationalize their laziness. Proverbs chapter 26, verse 16. In his own eyes, a slacker is wise, than 7 who can answer sensibly. You ever been that person? Had like 7 people speaking sensibly to you? You're like, nope. Yes, I have. I have. Have you ever sat in the council of wisdom and not taken it? Functioned as the fool. And we do this. One of the things that helps us do this in today's world is that we live in echo chambers. We only listen to the voices that affirm what we already believe, rather than listening to those who actually might cause some confrontation in our beliefs. So we isolate ourselves. We get in what's called an echo chamber, where we only hear what we already affirm, rather than challenging our beliefs. And this is the thing, if you hear me, if you challenge your beliefs, 2 things will happen. You'll either come solidified in that belief that it's actually true, or you'll come to a better and new truth. And which of those is bad? Strength always comes from resistance. When we live in a culture, and both sides do it. Both sides politically do. They fall into the trap of this idea of cancel culture. It's not new. It's a silencing of the voice of people who may think differently. And we talked about it in our growth group. This is off the notes right here. Talk about it in our growth groups. The only thing that can happen if you know the truth and you're rooted in Jesus and you're walking in the presence of the Lord, if you get in a conversation with someone who believes differently than you, challenges your beliefs, you will be, one of 2 things, rooted deeper into your belief, which is a good thing. 2, you will come to understand truth, Jesus, in a new and better way. Or 3, you may be the very one that I talked about earlier that has that speech that is compelling to that person. So when you push them out of the circle and don't allow them to have a voice, you actually push them away from experiencing Jesus. The problem is, you want me to just tell you, you know what the problem is? We step in the fool when we think that Jesus will not reveal himself to people. And the problem is because we're not walking in his presence right now. We're not walking in his presence when we're in those conversations. Or to say it this way, the way Proverbs is saying, we're not walking as the diligent or the wise person. We're playing the fool. The sluggard chooses the easy way versus confronting the hard things when it's the right thing. He chooses the easy way. Proverbs 20, verse 4, the slacker does not plow during planting season or winter season. Why? Because it's cold. Going out there and plowing, it's cold out there. At harvest, he looks and there's nothing. Chooses the easy way rather than confronting the hard things when they're the right things. This is the thing too with the sluggard. Business and character suffers. Business and character suffers. Versus a person whose business and character improves. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 19, the slacker's way is like a thorny hedge, but the path of the upright is a highway. A thorny hedge, his way is like that. So when you go on a way, people go with you. People go with you. And imagine leading people through a thorny hedge. It's awful. Like, this is the worst way ever. You don't want to walk through that. But the upright, his highway, he's got a highway, lots of people. It's easy. It builds up. His business and character improve. That's the idea here. The sluggard, he's restless with unsatisfied desires versus the person who's content, which is the diligent person. He's restless with unsatisfied desires. Proverbs chapter 21, 25 to 26 says this: a slacker's craving will kill him because his hands refuse to work. He is filled with cravings all day long, but the righteous give and don't hold back. He's craving and never satisfied. Versus the person who's content. The person who's content is a person who can give and don't hold back. They're good with what they have. They're not living in the idea and worldview of scarcity. They're living in the idea and worldview of abundance. And so they give generously. Versus the sluggard who doesn't do anything and wants to try to pile it up for himself. So my question is, are you the sluggard? We got the gullible, the stubborn, the stupid, and the sluggard. Versus the diligent one. The diligent one is one who is ready. Like I said, they're in a position of readiness to receive God and His wisdom. They're quick to accept a challenge. They're quick to accept a challenge. And when they accept the challenge, they're focused on what is crucial. They don't get caught up in the small stuff. They stay focused on what really, really matters, and they see it to its end. They see it through. It's the diligent person. They're decisive, they're conscientious. The diligent person studies the opportunity and then decisively moves in to grasp it wholeheartedly. Read that again. The diligent person studies the opportunity and then decisively moves in to grasp it wholeheartedly. The reason he said, this quote says wholeheartedly, is because often what we do is, because we fear that God won't step in and be faithful, we don't trust the faithfulness of God, we grab a hold of things really, really lightly. It's like, oh, I might do this. That way, if it doesn't work out, we gave God an out, as if He needs an out. Hey, hear me. If it's true that Jesus is the Lion of the tribe of Judah, He don't need you to protect Him. So once you just trust Him and step out wholeheartedly in what He's called you to, just trust Him. That's what the diligent person does. Josh, man, y'all can come. Diligence motivates a person. I think we have this quote. Diligence motivates a person to move quickly, accept stretching challenges, to stay focused on what is crucial in the long run rather than living for what is convenient at the present, and to grasp decisively the opportunities that God presents. Diligence motivates a person to move quickly, accept stretching challenges, to stay focused on what is crucial in the long run rather than living for what is convenient at the present, and to grasp decisively the opportunities that God presents. So who are you? Are you the gullible, the naive and easily led? Are you the stubborn? You got a lot of intellect, but you make really bad choices? Are you the stupid, the stubborn but darker person? Or are you the sluggard, the lazy one? What ways in your life have you fallen into the gullible, the stubborn, the stupid, and the sluggard? Proverbs is calling out. Wisdom, Lady Wisdom is calling out and saying, listen, we are all of these four at some point in time in certain aspects of our life. And so this message is not to come to you and make you feel guilty. I've had to wrestle with that this week. Remember, 3 inches off the ground, looking for the next hand grip, man. Like, I feel you. But we serve a God who communicated these realities to us in very, really awesome pictures. Like bears whose cubs have been taken, chasing after you. And those types of middle pictures so that we can really grasp and then be molded and shaped into the image of Christ. So what are we doing here? Well, we gather to continue to develop, to be a diligent person, to be the diligent, not the fool. Because we know, we're humble enough to know that we don't have it all together. We are the fool. We play the role of the gullible and the stubborn and the stupid and the sluggard from time to time. And what we long for is to be the diligent person who roots out the gullibility in our lives, who roots out the stubbornness, who roots out the stupidity, who roots out the laziness and the sluggard in our life. Because that's what Jesus does when you get to know Him. For He is wisdom. And as we walk in His presence in relationship with Him, He brings about diligence in our lives. We become persons who move quickly to accept stretching challenges. We stay focused on what is crucial in the long run rather than living for what is convenient at the present. And we grasp decisively the opportunities that God presents to us. That is the diligent person versus the fool. So be inspired towards living like the diligent person, towards chasing after the diligent, becoming more of the person of the diligent. Because Jesus was that in every way, shape, form. He didn't fail in any of these. And He wants to mold and shape us into that type of people. So that we are compelling, that we're a community that's compelling to the world. We're followers of the Messiah. The way we say it here, we are people of the way of Jesus. And it is a way of living. It's a diligence. It's the way of the diligent in Proverbs versus the way of the fool. That's the way of Jesus. And so we will strive to that. Walking humbly before the Lord and confessing and repenting when we fall short. And knowing that He's a good Father who pulls us back in. And He looks down at us and says, "This is my son, in whom I'm well pleased. This is my daughter, in whom I'm well pleased." If we're found in Christ, what can be said about Christ can be said about us.